Those of you who saw my X-Men First Class review will know I wasn't exactly thrilled to discover that they were putting a fifth film into a series that should have died long ago. I saw the trailer a while ago and it just seemed to be very much the same stuff happening all over again, but with a little glimmer of hope, seeing as the bloke who worked in the morgue in the first film made an appearance in it. Then, with critics saying that it was the best one so far, I thought maybe this will be the series version of Saw 6, i.e. surprisingly good for so late in the series. But seeing as it is supposed to be the best in the series, let's have a look at the competition. Part of what made the first film so good was the fact that it was trying something very different. The film focuses on a group of students, particularly Alex. They were all going on a school trip somewhere, and Alex has a premonition that the plane they're on is going to explode. He and a load of others get off, and they watch as the plane takes off and then does explode. Soon after, though, the people who survive the explosion start to die one by one in seemingly freak accidents. They find out that all of them were supposed to have been killed in the explosion, but because Alex intervened, Death is now coming after them to pick up the pieces and balance the books. Death is an actual force in the film, and if you do manage to cheat Death, it will come back after you later on. Not only does it try something different, it does it in a very good way, and the idea that Death is a force that you can't escape from, it did add a certain amount of creepiness to the film to think that once your time is up, there is nothing you can do about it. It wasn't the best film ever, and it probably wouldn't make it into my top 5 all time, but it was a really good film, and I would recommend it to anyone that hasn't yet seen it. As sequels go, Final Destination 2 wasn't actually that bad, mainly because the events of this film were a direct consequence of the events of the first film. The big disaster in this one is a massive pile-up somewhere, and someone has a premonition about it, they intervene, loads of people survive, but it turns out that people who survived the incident should have actually have died long ago. As an example, in the first film, one of the girls who survives the plane explosion ends up getting hit by a bus and killed that way. In this one, a woman says that she was on her way to a hotel somewhere, and the night she was supposed to be staying there, there was a mass gas leak or something, and everyone in the hotel died. But the bus she was on hit someone and killed them, so she never actually made it to her hotel. It's that if the girl had died on the plane when she was supposed to, the bus would never run her over, so the woman would have got to the hotel when she was supposed to, and she then would have died when she was supposed to. So this film is pretty much all the characters didn't die when they were supposed to because of the deaths that were never meant to have happened in the first film because they should have happened on the plane. It is a little bit complicated, but it does explain it quite well, and because of that, it ends up being a pretty good sequel. Because they think they have a bigger budget, the gore is ranked up a bit, but overall, it was a pretty good sequel, and not as good as the first one, but it was decent enough. For me, this is where the series started to lose it. The big disaster in this was a roller coaster going wrong and pretty much falling apart and killing everyone. Big premonition, blah 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 blah, but there was very little to connect this one to the other two films. Whereas the second one carried on directly, this one was just tacked on to the end. The only reference to the other films that it had was when people started to die from the accidents, and they were just doing research and found news articles of the events from the previous films. That was about it. There is the big thing that if someone dies when they shouldn't have died, then all the other people it wipes the slate clean and they all can start again. But it seems to be more focused on the gore this time round. I've got nothing wrong with gory films, it's just, it didn't really fit. The traps were quite over the top, even more than they normally are, but whereas with the other ones you do need to take them with a pinch of salt. With this, it pushed it a little bit even for a Final Destination film. So it was interesting enough, I suppose, but it was just an unnecessary film tacked onto the end of two films which were pretty good. This was the first in the series to be released in 3D as well as 2D. I worked at my local cinema when this film was released, and from what people were saying, because the film was made for 3D, the 3D version was better than the 2D one. I cannot stand 3D, and frankly the sooner it fucks off the better. But I went to see it in 3D, and it would probably be a contender for the funniest film of the year. Anytime someone died, everyone just creased up laughing, partly because the accidents in this are so over the top, it's just ridiculous. The big accident in this is, I think they were at some sort of Grand Prix thing or something, and there's a problem with one of the car, it things fly into the crowd, then the building starts to collapse and die. There was probably some big thing like if someone dies out of order, they all survive, or something like that, but I can't remember. I've not actually seen it since I saw it at the cinema. But again, there was very little to link it to the previous films, if anything at all. So once again, it was just another Final Destination film just tacked onto the end to try and make some money out of the dead horse. It was a bit stupid. If you want a good laugh, go and see it because it was really funny, but that really would be the only thing that held this film up. It was over the top, stupid, and completely unnecessary. And now the part you've all been waiting for, Final Destination 5. Best one of the series, my arse. It was probably okay at best. The big disaster in this one is a bridge collapsing, premonition, people survive, but the big thing is that the bloke from the first film who appears in it tells them that if they sacrifice someone, then they get the years they have left, a la the skeleton key. It probably wasn't quite as over the top as the fourth one was, but then because of that it lost some of the comedy value. There were a few times where it actually did try to be funny, and it did succeed on a number of occasions, but that was just sort of odd lines that were put in or things that happened. It wasn't anything to do with the actual deaths. Again, it was going for the gore thing, and there were a few points where the 3D would have come into it, but frankly, 3D can go fuck itself. It's okay, it really wasn't the best of the series. That crown still goes to the first one, but that's probably because that introduced something new, whereas this one, it again was just tacked on to the end. The deaths, though, they do have a lot of build-up for things which may not even come into it, and it pretty much took subtlety, put it into a bag and threw it out the window. Whenever there's something, it will sort of like zoom in on something, then zoom into a character's face, it will start to get dark, the music will rise as if it's sort of going, look, we're showing you something! And then sometimes that would just be the only time we ever see it, and it will naff off and we won't see it again. Some of the deaths, they do sort of start off as if they're going to die one way, but then they end up dying in another way. There was one where one of the girls is a gymnast, and as there's all these people doing sort of the balance beam, those bar things and other stuff, and a screw's coming loose from the beam. There's a fan that's been plugged in where the wire's frayed, and there's an air conditioning unit on the roof where that's rattling, screws coming loose, and it's also dripping onto the floor, right near to where the exposed wire is, funnily enough. But a screw comes out of the air conditioning unit and it lands onto the balance beam right at the end where one of the girls is doing all these flips and things. But even though she's actually being watched, no one notices that this screw is there on the balance beam. Even she doesn't notice it. And there's a few moments where she's like giving it all of this on the beam and she never ends up actually standing on it. She gets off and she goes over to where the water's near the wire, and the water sort of goes through the wire and it's getting closer and closer to her feet, but she ends up dropping a towel onto it. She then ends up going onto the bar thing, and someone else then goes onto the balance beam with the screw still on it. And it ends up that the woman on the balance beam sort of going on there, she ends up stepping on the nail, falls off the balance beam, knocks over the powder thing that they do their hands with. That goes into a fan, which annoys the woman spinning on the whatsits. She then falls off and ends up becoming a crumpled mess on the floor. It did not need to be that drawn out. The screw coming out of the bar, then it coming loose while she was on it, splat on the floor, that would have done the job perfectly, and we wouldn't have needed all this other stuff going on. Maybe they're just trying to keep you guessing about what is actually going to happen, but it's unnecessary stuff that we do not need to see, and frankly it would have been better if it wasn't even there at all. As an overall film, it was alright, I suppose. It certainly wasn't as good as some of the previous ones, and I'm going to have a little bit of a rant about something. It's not the film's fault about this, it's just it's happened so many times in other films that it's starting to bug me now. There's always a character with glasses, and at some point during these films, as well as other films, they are going to lose their glasses at some point. The thing is, as soon as they lose their glasses, they pretty much become blind, and they need everybody to help them out. In, I think it was one of the Mummy films, there was a bloke who had glasses, lost them, and he was sort of walking along the wall like that, trying to find his way. think Velma lost her glasses in one of the Scooby-Doo films and was then crawling around on the floor going, I can't see without my glasses. And there was a girl in Final Destination 5 who lost her glasses and she pretty much became an invalid and had to sort of walk along the cars and stuff, and she had to crawl along a beam whilst the bridge was collapsing. And someone actually yelled out, follow the sound of their voice, as if she wouldn't be able to see them there. It doesn't work like that. I've got glasses and if I take them off, I can see well enough to be able to cope. Things are a little bit blurry, but if I was in a situation like that where the bridge was collapsing and my glasses came off, I would be able to get out perfectly fine without needing to sort of feel my way along or have to follow someone's voice. It happens too often now, and it would be really nice if a film just did something different with it. Rant is now over. Final Destination 5, though, I seriously hope this is going to be the last one in this series. It should have been left at number 2, maybe number 3, just to finish it off as a trilogy with one tacked onto the end. We've had enough of these now, we do not need another one, and if you like the other films, then go and see it. You could do a lot worse, but frankly, go and see Conan the Barbarian first. It's still over the top itself, but it's a lot better than this was. A couple of things I just wanted to mention while I was here. The first one being Spy Kids 4D. I've not seen any of the Spy Kids films, but the 4D aspect of the latest one kind of intrigued me. I've not gone and seen the film, but I did have a look at what the 4D actually was. Scratch and sniff cards. That's just stupid. Who actually thought it'd be a good idea to stand up in the meeting and go, I know what this film needs, scratch and sniff cards. I can believe that someone would actually do that, but what makes it stupid is that everyone in the meeting actually thought that was a good idea and they went through with it. If I was in that meeting, I'd have told them to shut up and sit down. But moving on, the other thing is Paranormal Activity 3. We didn't need a number 2, we certainly do not need a number 3. The first one was really good and scary, the second one wasn't as good and it actually kind of ruined some of the goodness of the first one, and a third is just going to drive it into the ground. See you next time.